thank you all for coming to tonight to share this wonderful event with Rabbi Katy. She has worked very hard on this for years, and it's finally come to fruition. Well, you all know Katy. I don't have to introduce her at all to you.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. It's just a delight to see all of you here. And I'm just very excited by all of you being here. And so, yeah, so I'm going to just tell you a little bit about the book. There's a part of, this is a book, this is not really a book that you read. This is a book that you spend time with. And so I did a workshop with the book in the course of writing it. And so one of the participants from that is going to share a little bit about it. Then I'm going to give you a little bit of an experience of the book so that you can just get an idea of what it's like, what it's about. And then there'll be some time for questions and answers after that. So, so what is this book about? This book is an interaction among different parts. There are photographs of trees, which are taken by my mother, Mary North Allen, Zichra Livracha, may her memory be a blessing. And then there are bits of text. Most of them are biblical texts, but a few of them are Talmudic texts, just little clips, a few words. And then on the facing page of each one, there are a few sort of poetic words that, and the idea is that the three of these together interact and create something that's more than the sum of the parts. So, so this is what you find in the book. But what is it? It's a journey through beginnings, through trauma, and toward healing. And that's the gist of the whole sort of flow, the story. In a way, it's a story, but it's not your usual story. It's a story that combines, and when you sort of, if you look at just the pictures, you get one kind of story. If you look at just the text, you get something else. But if you look at the three parts together, you get something deeper and richer. And so my hope is with this book that it can be like a resource, a tool for people to use. And part of the reason that I made this like small little book, I was really clear from the beginning that I wanted it to be a small little book, was that it could be something you could really easily hold in your hand. You could take it out among the trees if you want. You know, why did I just choose trees? Well, part of it was because I had these boxes and boxes of my mother's, who was an artist, her incredible pictures of black and white pictures of trees that had been a big piece of her work that she had done during her life. And so they were kind of calling to me and wanting to connect with them in a different way, but also because I love trees. So I think at this point, I'd like to ask Carol to speak. One of the things that when I did this workshop was I specifically tried to get people from different faith traditions involved. So Carol kind of actually in and of herself just fit that bill because she comes from an interfaith family, she's interested in philosophy and religion, and she currently attends services in 8 groups and 4 faith traditions: Unitarian, Universalist, Jewish, Episcopal, and Roman Catholic. So she kind of embodies interfaith.
Thank you, Rabbi Katy. I'm Carol Ryman. I've known Rabbi Katy for a good 10 years in different circumstances. One of the things about her that is so impressive in the work that she does is that a lot of it appears to be very gentle on the surface, but it has a very powerful effect. And there is a great deal of openness and possibility with all the material that she provides and the things that she says. This book is very much a guide, a resource. I realized that the size and the very light heft of it makes it the perfect thing for me to carry with me. I haven't had a chance to look at the book itself that much, but my first time looking at it, I was again mesmerized by one of the photographs, and it just had this effect of making me feel really calm in the midst of all the things that I'm doing. And it reminded me of how I'm able to be comfortable in myself. I think that's one of the crucial things with this material. It's very open. There's the combination of the words and the images. There's a lot of white space to the pages. And part of what we did in the workshops was to do the actual interacting. One could call it meditation. One could call it a lot of things. It's an experience. It was lovely to do it with other people. Each person brings something else. And I think when you get a taste of this, you'll realize some of the possibilities. I had a lot of things going on in my life, and I am sure that working through this material helped ground me, helped me make good decisions in the next months after the workshops. I have felt a very increased sense of self and being comfortable with myself, holding both the things that we think of as not so great and all the wonderful possibilities that are there. So with that, I think I'll hand it back to Rabbi Katy, and hopefully we can get a wonderful taste of this very flavorful book. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carol. So one of the things that I put into the front of the book, and I did this after having run this workshop and with input from when I ran the workshop, I said to people, I want your reactions. And after the first session, there was a lot of reaction about ideas of how to do this and how to use sort of different modalities and different kinds of senses in order to experience it and express that experience. So that in the front of the book, I have a whole section that's suggestions on how to use the book. And so one of the things that we did was movement. And that's what I'm going to invite you to do today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with the first chapter of the book, which is called Beginning. And I'm going to read it. It's in both English and Hebrew. And I'm going to read both languages. And it doesn't matter if you understand the Hebrew or not, because it's another sound. So it gives you another way of experiencing the book. And it's the same if you look at it, you wouldn't hear it, but you would see it on the page. And again, whether you understand it or not, it brings, I think it brings something else into play. So what I'm going to invite you to do, if you're able, is to stand and at once I start sharing my screen, and keep your eyes open so that you can see the pictures. You won't really be able to see the text. It's kind of small, but I will be reading it. And to just let your body move according to what you feel happening to you as I read and as you look at the photographs on your screen. So you can kind of, look and then maybe close your eyes a minute and then look again, or however it works for you, but to just stay connected to the images as well as the sounds. And this will give you a little bit of a taste of what it is. And appropriately for tonight, but for so many moments in life, it's called Beginning. And so this is the beginning of the life of this book outside of being in my heart and in my home. And so it's good for that. But the reality is that for those of us who are Jewish, we're coming up to Shavuot, which might feel like the end of something, like we're just about finished counting from Passover until Shavuot. But then we're also acknowledging revelation and experiencing revelation. So that's another beginning. So, every time something changes in our life, there's something that's a beginning. So I just invite you to contemplate beginnings as we do that. I invite you to stand. And if you're not able to stand, I invite you to just move your body in a seated position. And I do invite you, if you're comfortable doing so, leaving your video on, even though we might not see your full body, just to sort of maintain that sense of connection to each other and community that we're in at this moment. A Tree of Life, a story in word, image, and text. For a person is a tree of the field. Ki ha'adam etz hasadeh. Beginning, Hatkala. A birth is a new beginning, and so is a death. Purposeful decisions precipitate beginnings, as do random events. Wondrous experiences spark new beginnings, and so do disasters. Life is not a straight line. Impediments inform and complicate the trajectory of life. Obstacles and challenges spawn new beginnings. Both tree and human continue to grow. Why begin with the letter Bet? The ancient sages ask of the Torah and the mythological story of creation. Why the second letter of the Aleph Bet and not the first? Perhaps because the letter Bet begins the word bracha, blessing. What do beginnings mean to you? In the beginning, Bereshit, a seed is planted. Zera Nizra. It is a tree of life. Eitz Chaim Chi. Taking root. Makeh Shorashim. A shoot shall grow forth. Vayatza Choter. Reaching toward light. Moshit Laor. By your light, we see light. The Orchach Nire Or. Mother tree nourishing. Eitz Ha'em Mezin. All my springs are in you. Kol Mayanai Bach. Overcoming obstacles. Hitgabrut Amishkolim. Michsholim. What is a straight path? Ezohi derech yeshara. Growing ever upward. Someach klape mala. Its leaves are ever fresh. Vahaya alehu ra'anan. never quite knowing how or why. Leolam lo legamre yodea ech omedua. Not relying on miracles. Velo samchinan anisa. So I invite you to sit down again, and if anybody would like to just share anything, if anybody wants to share a response or awareness or feeling or insight or connection that you felt during that, I just invite you to do so.
I want to say that I found it very relaxing to hear you say these words. I mean, I was reading it. I was really taken by the beautiful photos that your mother took, but it added a resonance today to hear you and your beautiful, soft voice. And you have so much invested and so much involvement with this project that it added a whole nother level of enjoyment for me. So thank you.
Thank you. Suri, Rabbi Suri, welcome.
Yeah, I also think these photographs are just magnificent. And I'm intrigued by the way you connected a photo with a particular quote. And I'm curious, what was your process for deciding which magnificent quote to choose with each photo?
Thanks for asking that question. Well, it was a long process. I started out with this idea that I was going to get all these quotes about trees. And then after a while, it was like, well, no, because, you know, sometimes I'm trying to say something else or looking for some other idea here. And, you know, if I'm talking about overcoming obstacles, I don't need an idea about, you know, about trees. So, you know, sometimes there was something that popped into my head that I knew. Sometimes it was just kind of like searching and thinking or reading through. And sometimes, you know, it changed. It started as one thing and began as something else. So it was a kind of a lot of different things that went into choosing each one. And sometimes did it feel right? And there was a lot of evolution to the process of creating the book. Which I can talk about in a few minutes, but so yeah, so it was a multitude of things that might have gone into that. Yeah, thanks.
Can I say a couple things? I have the distinction of having grown up with this individual, Katie Allen, my younger sister. I actually remember when I was about 3, sitting in my mother's lap and inadvertently poking my elbow into her tummy, and she said, "Oh, be careful, there's a baby in there." That was Katie. And she was at the bottom of the totem pole of two older brothers, and who weren't always very nice to her. And she has clambered her way to the top without beating us up. Now, with that little bit, I want to really acknowledge the cover and that tiny little spruce tree in the snow. And any of you know who know our mother's book, and if you don't, you should race to the Katie Allen bookstore and get yourself one. But she went through major midlife crisis, which consisted of 4 psychiatric hospitalizations at the beginning for 4 months, shock treatments, and she just took her healing so seriously and worked at it so much that, and then combined it with the photography. And that, you know, in a synergy which had not existed in her life before. And I wish that for everybody. But this photograph on the cover, this little tree, was planted by the machine shed on our farm when we were kids. And to me, it has always been an image of lonesomeness or being way outnumbered by the conditions of life. And that little tree is now a towering spruce tree. But that image is so expressive of sort of an against all odds kind of courage, which Katie has expressed, our mother has expressed, and she's talking about that journey in which we can recreate, and it's wonderful.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Tom.
So Rabbi Katy,
Yeah,
getting back to the selection of the words and the
yeah.
part where you took from the Torah or Talmud. So the words on the left of the page are your words,
Right, correct.
and those are from the sources. I love the way you connected the two of them.
Oh, thank you.
Well,
Thank
while
you.
I was standing there, I was reading the words that you had come up with, taking and connecting it with the Torah piece or Talmud piece, whatever it may be in the photograph. And I really think it's remarkable how you connected it in all these pages. I mean, I went through the book and I had the same feeling for each one. It's beautiful.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So I want to just back up a little bit and just explain a little bit about how this, well, why did I start doing this book? I can't answer that question really. It's just like one of those things that you have to do. And but I started that I was going to use these pictures to somehow do an autobiography. And I started trying to put it like with my life. And then I started really realizing that my life was, if you start, been on this planet a number of decades now, and things are convoluted and you go in circles and you go around in different ways and so on and so forth. And it just wasn't working. And finally, it just dawned on me, it's like, well, wait a minute, there's a universal process that's going on here. And I just need to take that process and use that, which I experienced, but that, so many of us experience. And frankly, just living in this crazy world right now, we're all dealing with trauma. So, so it became more of a, what is the sort of arc of the process? And in a way, I mean, the end of it comes back with sort of to the beginning again, because we keep having to go deeper and dig deeper and heal more and find more strength and cope with another crisis or another trauma or something. There's so many different kinds of trauma. I mean, there are the ones that are like this sudden terrible event that happens, and then there are these others which are just the result of this kind of chronic toxic stress that we're exposed to. So there's lots of opportunities in our world and our lives, unfortunately, for trauma. And the more that we sort of find an awareness of that and tools to cope with it. So then it became, okay, I'm talking about something that's not just my experience, but all of our experience. And that ultimately made it much more meaningful to me. And I think made it much more accessible when I sort of stepped back and wasn't trying to just say, oh, this is what happened to me in my life in some kind of artistic, poetic way. So.
Well, I have another question, Rabbi. Why trees? Why did you, why is it all about trees?
I don't know exactly, except as I mentioned, because I think that these boxes full of our mother's tree pictures were kind of calling to me in some way. But I do love trees. And one of the things I saw on Facebook, and then it was one of those things I couldn't find again, but I saw posted these two circles. One was a circle with animals all and plants and like that, and then humans in the beginning, in the middle, saying like, okay, we're the center of the universe. And then the other one was with a human as part of that circle. And this process, like, what does it take for us? We're so separated from the rest of the natural world. What does it take for us to feel more a part of that? And I think that must have happened to our mother during the process of taking these pictures. But I also know that it happened to me as I was doing it. I started noticing trees more as I was looking at her pictures so much. I was thinking about trees so much. I started being more aware of them. I mean, I've always been aware of them. There have been times when I sometimes I'm a real literal tree hugger, but it just it made me feel more connected to the natural world to spend so much time with these pictures of trees, which was interesting because it wasn't taking me actually out in amongst the trees, but it was taking me, there through the photographs.
And did this writing this book, did this affect your relationship with your mom? With how you...
It's interesting. Once people are gone, it's been 10 years now that our relationship stays. It just changes dramatically. But yes, I feel like there was another level of sort of coming closer to her, healing in that relationship. I certainly was. For me personally, I think it took me to a depth that I needed to go to, because I was like, everything was making me, around November 2016, things started making me even more crazy than they had been. And it was like, I can't live like this. And so whatever was there before had just came out more. And this process of the book was really healing for me personally in a very deep way. And I feel like, if I can just share a little bit of that with anybody who picks up this book and works with it and spends time with it, my goal really would be to not only do some workshops with people myself, but to encourage other people to use this book as a resource for a workshop with people that and it takes time. You need some time to sort of process what you're experiencing with each section of the book. It was partly the need to make sure that I was actually really saying what I needed to say. And that was not just up here, that was in my heart, that was in my gut, that was in my whole body. What is it that I need to say in order to talk about, to express this journey through trauma and healing? And frankly, there's a couple of chapters that, one of them is called Trauma Unbeknownst, because, we don't necessarily realize we're being traumatized at the time that it happens. And that chapter and then chapter after it, we're sort of just in a fog and not really knowing where you are. Those were tough. Those kind of made me sort of relive and re-experience and in a different way, my own personal experiences. But I think that that's something that it's like we can't shy away from that stuff. We don't have to, and whether it's in our past or in our present out there in the world. But so that process, but also then the healing part of it, beyond the awakening, the finding light, embracing darkness, all of these things that I talk about in this book, that this is that really experiencing those with my full being and connecting it both to the natural world and to sacred text and to my own words. I mean, that's really, it's the Torah of our lives, it's the Torah of our tradition, and it's the Torah of the universe. And bringing those three together is just something that I've always felt was important, that each one enriches the other. And so by doing that, it just took me to a place that I had never been before in terms of dealing with my own issues in life.
Yeah, you and I, we walked through many of these chapters page by page. And when we got to the trauma chapter, I have to say, I was in tears. I mean, I could feel it in my body. And I find, I think maybe you talk about that a little. Maybe that's why you do these workshops. And people have to be really present with the material. It's not just like, reading your favorite beach book.
Right.
it's, you have to be present with it. And do you suggest, maybe journaling as you're reading each page or each spread to really help you become really centered and focused and present?
Right. We used texture, we used drawing, we used movement, we used sound. There's just all different kinds of ways to do it. I also just need to say that, the other part of working through this was sharing it with Gabi. And first of all, we had like numerous discussions, many discussions about the Hebrew and getting the right word in Hebrew as well as getting the right word in English. But it was also like if she said, oh, that doesn't feel quite right, it was also always like a thing, okay, maybe I need to go back and rethink this. Like at first I would be, well, what do you mean it's not right? And then it's like, okay, if it's not right for her, then I need to pay attention to that. And when she did feel like it was right, then, then that was an affirmation that maybe I was getting it right. I might have ended up still feeling like, oh, wait, I didn't quite go exactly where I wanted to go. But that was sort of another marker for me of how I was doing in terms of getting it or not.
Question from Jeffrey Spitz Cohen. The Torah is called a tree of life. Why did the sages choose trees as a metaphor for our central text? Do they offer a reason?
It makes sense. I mean, the tree, trees are just like such a symbol of life. And now that we know, what we know about forests and mother trees and stuff, I feel like that just enriches that idea of Torah as a tree of life. Okay, this Torah is the mother tree, this is just like taking care of everybody and nourishing us when we're hurting. And so that was like the sages knew something that we didn't even know yet in the scientific way, but that intuitive knowing about the importance of trees in the world.
There's a photograph. In fact, you showed it tonight it's in the beginning section. It's the mother tree.
Right.
That picture, it haunts me every time I see it. And every time I go out into nature now, I'm always looking for that type of thing where there's one tree is protecting another tree. You did such a fabulous job curating these photographs. How many photographs did you go through in order?
That's a good question. I know there are about 60 photographs in the book, and I don't know, 100, 150, I don't know. The first time I was sorting through the photographs and I put them all around our living room and dining room to sort them out into piles and so on. And it felt like I was walking through my forest when I was there. So yeah, there were many. They're just such a powerful, and I think that they are metaphor in a tradition, in many traditions, not just in our tradition. So yeah.
So you were talking a little about the workshops. Do you think it's important for people to experience the workshop in order to experience the book? Is it really enhance the experience?
Well, what I invite you to do is to, there are a few different options of how you can experience this book. One is just to take it for yourself and to, look at these suggestions in the beginning, take the ones that appeal to you and use them on a very personal basis. Another way that you could do it is to gather with a group of friends or, neighbors, whatever, people that you want to, and to work through it like a chapter at a time together, experiencing it together. Another way is to through a workshop that I would run, or if you have a clergy person or just somebody you want to have lead it or facilitate it, you could do that too. I think the experience is going to be different if you do it by yourself or if you do it in a group. And I think there's some personal preferences involved in what you decide to do. But if you do it as a group, then you're sharing this process and this experience together, and you're listening to other people's reflections, which can maybe bring you something that you hadn't, awareness of something that, just like as in any group, that we feed from each other. Lori?
I just want to put a plug in for Rabbi Allen. My congregation and a few others in New York, Putnam County, we had Katie Allen speak to our congregation on Zoom, a congregation, and she was talking about climate change, but it was really very, very powerful. So if you can get the funds for your congregation, or better yet, maybe 3 or 4 in your area, or not even in your area, it could be across the country, across the world. And if Katie will speak to your congregation, I mean, people are still talking about it. It's been about a year, and they're still talking about how powerful it was when she spoke. So if you could come and do that again to my congregation and other congregations, I think it'd be great.
Oh, that's neat to know. Thank you, Lori. That's cool. That's great. Oh, wow.
And so how do you order the book?
Yes, you can find it on my website of katyzallen.com. And you can also go to Strong Voices Publishing and find it there.
I'm been thinking about that question of what makes trees so important in our text, and it's just coming at me that the whole process of Torah evolved from the whole scenario of Gan Eden with the trees. If we didn't have that tree episode, I don't want to call it original sin, but that tree episode in Gan Eden, how would our text have evolved forward? So it's a pretty significant.
First of all, if you start looking for nature references in the Torah, I mean, they're just everywhere. And then if you start looking for trees, there's like if you go to Safaria, which has got the whole of Jewish text, and you just put in tree, I mean, you're just going to get a zillion responses. So there's just so many ways that trees appear, and trees as metaphor, and trees as real. And, I just, the ark, the burning bush, people are putting things in here. So it's just, and I think, I mean, look, I'm not so familiar with other faith traditions, but I'm pretty sure you can probably find a significant role for trees in a lot of different faith traditions, because any that have any sort of connection to, wherever there's this sort of earth connection, it's going to be found there. So, and they are just such a great metaphor. The roots go deep. Our roots need to go deep. Their branches reach upward. I mean, it's just, there's trunks, they're strong. What better description for what we need to be in order to live a full and rich life can there be?
Katie, Isha Kochech, it's so you and so beautiful. And that's kind of my question is, I didn't get your book yet. And I couldn't move when you were showing the initial pages, because I was frozen just reading your words and then also experiencing the pictures. It was like, it was too rich. I couldn't move. But you started with birth and death in Bereshit. And I had so many things strike me. I mean, you know me well enough. I'm very sensitive. And so many things that you said just in the very beginning were so vulnerable. They were so honest. They were so personal. And that's a gift, because of course we have these feelings too. But we're not always aware, like you were saying, the underlying traumas, etc. And yet you also like frame it with Torah and with Talmud. And I'm wondering, like, is this, besides bringing the memory of your mother and her, amazing work, to be a legacy of blessing for others to share, is it also your Torah? Because there's teaching at the very, very beginning, and then each thing that you wrote.
Yeah.
And so, is this your wisdom sharing of, because the trees, yes, they're symbolic, but especially didn't know when you actually wrote it too, and the pandemic, like the depth of the pandemic was a rebirth of a lot of nature around the world. And this, what you've done here, kind of just re-emphasizes all of that, that the trees have been there before us and will be there after us. And can we finally learn? So just like a thank you, and
Thank you,
for being
Lois.
so personal.
Thank you, Lois. That's, I really appreciate what you said. And so the reality is that I was really working on this during the pandemic. And you know, that fact that we were all sort of limited in what we could do meant that there were a lot of things that might have normally been distractions in my life that were gone, and that really were helpful for me in terms of, you know, that I was able to make use of that to have sort of this kind of more quiet in my life, to go to a place that, you know, you can't necessarily go to in yourself if you're just constantly running and distracted and whatever. I mean, I'm not a rabbi of a big congregation, so I wasn't like having to deal with everybody. I have a small community, so and I'm kind of retired from, you know, I was retired from healthcare chaplaincy, so I wasn't working in the hospital or something. But is this my Torah? I think the answer is yes, that I feel like this is the most authentic voice that I have ever found for myself. And so it feels very real and very comfortable and very, and I feel unafraid to share it, because it feels like it's really, really me. So it's given me a depth of understanding of myself that that just makes me feel like I just want to share this in any way that this might help anybody just a little bit. And I know that the people who were in there was another woman who was supposed to speak tonight and wasn't able to at the last minute, but she had talked about the way that it just really was so powerful her to experience this book in a group setting. And you heard from Carol that was true for her too. So I think it does have potential to be really useful as a resource for people. And that's really what, you know, I want to share this with all of you and beyond this. So thank you to everybody for and I'm it, and as I say, I want to sort of help train the trainers. I don't want to feel like I have to do it all. I want to just share this because nobody has to get all of it, you know, in order to be able to help share it with other people. You only need to feel comfortable doing that. And so, and letting the photographs, letting the text, letting the words and speak to each other and combining. And, you know, so, because that was something that was interesting near the beginning, as I was sort of leading people on the meditation, and I didn't do that this time, but was, how does your experiencing the words impact how you see the picture? How does looking at the photograph impact how you hear the words? You know, how did three of them impact?
Well, since people were talking about the role of the tree in the Israelite tradition, I wanted to point out something that, as I see it, the tree, there aren't that many trees in that region. It's kind of a rare thing, you know. This is not sub-Saharan Africa. And the tree is kind of a vulnerable thing. We talk about how it's important to stand by the water and so forth. There's a lot of things in the Bible which they have connotations we don't expect, like a lioness and an eagle are seen as nurturing in the Psalms. And I think the tree is seen as something vulnerable, and we are invited to identify with the tree, which I think is what your book is doing.
That's so true. I mean, you're right. I was thinking about that even as I was talking. It's like, yeah, the ancient Near East was a different kind of an ecosystem than what we have here in Northeastern United States. Yeah.
Are you have plans for more photos from the vast trove your mother left?
Oh my heavens. You know, there's a zillion pictures of people, like families, and you know, I'm not finished. I don't think I'll be finished with the legacy from my mother until, you know, until I can't function anymore, but trying to get it, trying not to leave all of the responsibility of figuring it out to the next generation after this. So I think many of us have some of that, but yeah, she left a lot.
And you that
Laurie,
book that was so beautiful of her. Lots
yeah,
of,
this
is that on your website? That
it is, yes.
I'm wondering how it was working with your mother on this project, and whether it brought up a lot of stuff, whether it was intense, whether it was peaceful, cathartic.
Yeah, it was a lot of different things, I would say. It was interesting because one of the people who was in that workshop talked about the interweaving. In response, she talked about the interweaving and trauma and healing between the generations. And, you know, as my brother spoke earlier, talked about my mother's struggles with mental health, and, you know, which was dealing with her trauma, which was, you know, and we're all aware of this sort of intergenerational trauma thing. So I think that this fact that this was an intergenerational experience here was also about healing between the generations. And, you know, for sure, when this other book that I did was a book that she had worked on for 30 years, actually a memoir, which she never finished. And then after she passed on, I spent several years pulling that together and getting that ready for publication. And it has some of her black and white photographs and some of her really unusual color work also. And that process was healing, and this was healing in another way. So taking my story, that was her story, this was my story. And I think any time that we take the, you know, grieving and healing and all these kinds of things, they take time and energy and space, and we don't always have that, but sometimes even just a few minutes, you know, just a few minutes of whatever. Those are so important. We have to be doing that now with this craziness that we're living in this world. I mean, and in this country and in this, you know, everywhere. I mean, you know, pick your issue and point at it. We have to find ways to take moments of quiet. And if we're able to, at the same time that we're sort of working on ourselves, to be doing that in connection with family members in any way, shape, or form, so that the healing is within a family as well, then that's just really important. I mean, I think we all have to be not telling people what to do, but just not my thing so much. But the more we're able to really think about healing when we're feeling like we're being hurt all the time, I feel like there's only good that can come out of that. So that was kind of a long answer to your question.
I love the idea that people, you can do a train the trainers to help other spiritual leaders use this as a tool in their own lives, in their own communities and congregations. I think that's very exciting. I haven't heard you say that before.
I appreciate your input and support too. So thank you.
And I hope people let other people know that the book is available, and you can go to Rabbi Katy's website or go directly to the publishers.
I just want to mention, in my view, this is what leadership is. There's so many people who are experiencing trauma or have, and not to resolve it leaves us generally speaking, taking it out on ourselves or other people. And art is a way of integrating and redirecting. Relationship with nature is a way of integrating, and with the sacred texts and making them come alive in a new way. And it's fantastic as a brother to see the way Katy has just cottoned to the Jewish tradition and made so much of it. It's an absolute joy to behold. But anyway, I think this is what the world needs in so many ways. It's more than just a little piece. It's part of what I hope is an increasing genre to help people heal. Thanks.
Well, thank you everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. I put my email in there. You can also reach me through my website, katyzallen.com. If you have questions, comments, anything, and I appreciate all of you coming and your kind words and supportive. And if there's anything that I can do to help you in figuring out how to use this book, feel free to reach out.